Hello, and thank you for joining me here on So Stitch Hex. Today, I'm going to be talking about a topic I've really wanted to do for a couple weeks now, but I've been doing research on it. And also, it's hard to make videos because doing videos can be just as bad as social media. Like, it's bad for your mental health because you're also watching yourself and critiquing yourself, and it can be really difficult. But I'm going to be doing a video on toxic spirituality. What is this? So these are some of the issues we face in the community that don't really get talked about, honestly. People bring them up occasionally, and I have a link in the description for the 2 articles that I use, as well as the channel that I've just been so inspired by. I love everything they do, which I was studying this at the time I found their channel. I think that's one of the reasons I did find their channel, was because I was studying. But the channel is called Occultism with a Side of Salt, and they talk about different issues in the community that I frankly think should be discussed more. I'm going to link the particular video down below, but you should listen to all of them. They're just wonderful little podcasts. It's wonderful. But in toxic spirituality, basically you have lots of issues with things like gatekeeping, gaslighting, religious censorship, and other types of manipulation that can occur. And to start off, I'm going to talk about the top 10 tactics for manipulation used by narcissists. So, like, manipulation is when someone tries to handle or control a person or group of people. And some of the tactics that they use are projection, so putting their own insecurities off onto someone else. So, like this one person telling me that they believe I'm impetuous, reckless, and neurotic. That was it. And people have told me they're pretty sure they're projecting, but I don't really know, because that person's usually too animated and they make me uncomfortable a lot of the times. They've gotten better, but whatever. But everything makes me uncomfortable. So. There are things like generalization, which can happen when you just kind of paraphrase something or you rephrase it in a bad way. Like, everyone generalizes. I can tell you that I don't think you're doing like the most effective method for a production of a product. Like at my work, you're not doing it the most effective way because it's a new system, and you will tell someone, well, she thinks it isn't going to work, this isn't working out, and it's like, no, that's not what I said. And like, I'm saying it's not effective, it's not the most timely fashion, and I'll exaggerate on it, you know, when I'm talking about it, but they'll just summarize in the most general way possible. Someone else I told like how I was uncomfortable going to certain functions, and they generalized it as she was told she couldn't come, or she was made to feel she couldn't come, and it's like, no, I just don't feel comfortable, and that's me, and I'm telling you. But another thing is changing the subject, which has happened to me before, and this can happen when you call them out on their problems. Like, I called someone out how they made me uncomfortable. They had done something that was causing me actual trauma at work. I was having to deal with it, and their response to me saying, hey, like, I've been trying to find a way to talk to you about this, but like, this really messed me up, like. And they're like, you're not trustworthy, you're not honest. Like, whoa, calm down. I do believe that person is a narcissist. The other people I'm mentioning, this is just a great example of this, but they're not narcissists producing this activity. They're just people. You can do these activities without being like a narcissist. Something I have been dealing with is like name calling and like a smear campaign and like the general like jokes and like trash talk from people. And one of the jokes with one of these things is when people try to smear campaign, so they try to spread like rumors about you and other things about you through like the general community, and it can cause just gossip and rumors, and this just isn't fair. With the jokes, there was a guy who was constantly like hurting my feelings because he would be like, he'd be like, your family is such trash, like fuck your family. And it's like, he didn't know that I only have one of each of my grandparents, but I've told people before, just nobody cares to remember. I'm not blaming them for that, but like, no one really knows because no one cares. That's not information that they store away. But he'd also go up to me, and when I would be with my boyfriend, who we weren't public yet, but he'd come up and be like, well, I'll leave so you guys can fuck, and then he'd ditch. Like, he'd just walk out the door and slam the door shut. It's like, bruh, like, that's not appropriate. That's not cool. That's not what was happening. It's like, could you not be so crass and inappropriate, and like, it lacks creativity, honestly, but it was wrong and I didn't like it, and like, they left before we could say anything, or they do it just to him. Like, they'd tell him like, well, you know, and they're making the snide remarks about me, and I don't like it. But, you know, that happens. Then there's the idea of moving the goalposts, which moving the goalposts I think works both ways. It works with saying, oh, you need to be here, and then once you reach that like status of I completed that task, they say that you were supposed to be here. So you can never meet their expectations, and you always feel like you're falling short. This also happens when people move the goalposts or change some of the aspects of what that means. So like your goal is to complete this exercise, do it repeatedly, and then someone be upset that you couldn't tell them why the exercise was important. That'd be a good example of like changing the goalpost. And like, I don't know. These are some issues that you can have, and some of them come from different things. Like one of the videos I watched from Occultism with a Side of Salt talks about the mentorship and gurus and like problems with the toxicity in there, and that's a completely different issue that I feel like they discuss, but it can be brought up with this narcissistic behavior. If you want to watch it, just scroll through their videos. I have listed the important one, which is how the love and light aspects are toxic. The last of the 10 of manipulation tactics is gaslighting. Now, gaslighting I do want to talk about in broader terms later, but you can see gaslighting in comments like, well, it's all in God's plan, or you manifest your own reality, you create your own like reality, so like law of attraction stuff, but it's ableist. It ignores people with severe anxiety and depression symptoms who can wake up in the morning and hate everything about their life. And I've had people who, when I made the comment that it is ableist, people came to me and said, yes, I've woken up in tears, crying and praying and begging that something bad wouldn't happen to me today because I woke up feeling so terrible about myself because of my depression. They would tell me I was scared. And people don't think about that. Like, you think it's all love and light and it's positivity because it's like, ooh, manifestation, but like people who have the chemical imbalance in the brain that they aren't happy, they just don't make it, they're going to be more down on themselves. They're going to have lower self-esteem. They're going to think negative thoughts. They're going to be pessimistic. And that's normal to be somewhat pessimistic, but to have this overabundance of negativity, it can make it really hard when you're in a community that's like, oh, you bring your own reality, just change your mindset. Okay, you can't say you manifest your own reality, or that you manifest misfortune and chaos for all those around you, that you are a negative force to someone with severe depression. They're going to feel like more of a burden. I know somebody told me that, like, they told me, like, I'm ungrateful for the gifts that I'm given when I wasn't susceptible to somebody's advances on me. And it's like, wow. Like, sure, they are a person to care about me, and I did want a partner, but I don't just want anyone. More than that, it's like, how can you say, like, someone manifests their own reality if, like, something bad just happened to them? Like, or you say it's all in God's plan, like your house was burned down. Well, it's all in God's plan. Well, I don't like this plan. I want a new plan. Or I want to see where this plan's going. I don't like this ride. I didn't sign up for this roller coaster. I want off. Stop the ride now. And they're supposed to stop the ride, but no one's going to do that because this is life. So, like, it's ableist because it ignores these obvious disorders, and I don't think people bring that up. It's toxic in another way, that it's ignoring the broader scheme of things. Like, sure, you manifest your reality, but what about the guy who manifests his reality, and maybe he's a serial rapist, and he manifests his reality, and you happen to be in the little realm of his gravitational pull? Do you manifest your own misfortune then? I know someone who said that they wouldn't ever tell someone who was just raped that that it's all in God's plan, but they would think it. They're like, I would think it, but I would never say it. Isn't that just as bad if you create your own reality? If you think it, but you wouldn't say it? Isn't there something in the Bible, like, if you think about doing this thing, then you've already made the sinned with your heart, even if you haven't done it in the physical realm? I don't remember the exact phrasing, of course, but, like, I like that part. Another thing that I find interesting is actually where gaslight comes from, so you all know. Because if you didn't know what gaslighting was, it comes from a play from 1938 called Gaslight, where this man keeps changing tiny little pieces of the environment, like he adjusts the light, or he moves other things in the physical environment, and tells his wife that it wasn't happening, that she's imagining it, that she's crazy. And she eventually does go crazy. And that's what gaslighting is. It works to distort and erode your sense of reality. It eats away your ability to trust yourself, and inevitably disables you from feeling justified in calling out abuse and mistreatment. So it's like you're being too sensitive. Those are some of the issues that you can face, and I feel like more people should call it out. Another issue in the community that I brought up, that was another big topic, was spiritual bypassing. This is when you have anger phobias, when you're overly tolerant compassion, so you allow people to get away with doing things they shouldn't do. This can happen with spiritual bypassing. You can, like, your spirituality and universal love does not give you a pass from dismantling the system's oppression. Basically, people can overlook or avoid it because they'll say, well, there's a higher plan that's going to come to fruition, when really you should be fighting for the opposite. The actual term of spiritual bypassing comes from the psychologist John Wellwood in 1984, who was describing the Buddhist community and how they would avoid facing unresolved issues, emotional, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks, so that they wouldn't they could use their spirituality as a crutch. And essentially that's what spiritual bypassing does, is using it to avoid anger. You're avoiding the darker emotions, the darker sides of yourself, and it is an enticing form of escapism, enabling you to lean on your spirituality and other beliefs to avoid richer development of the soul. Some of the ways that it gets used is through optimistic bypassing, grandizement, and guru or saint bypassing. So saint is when you are like so saintly and you are a river unto your people, basically. It's when you are so black and white thinking and you just end up just being more of a self-sacrificing individual, and you seem to think that people can't have dark sides, and you overcompensate by being super sweet and super helpful and not really thinking about what you're doing, not looking out for people taking advantage of you, which can lead to finger pointing. Another type of bypassing is just pointing at other people as your problems, but this can actually lead to that. You can also see this in the victim bypass, which is when you are like empathic or have a natural talent and you blame it, oh, other people are making me feel this way, or like similar emotion. You see it with optimistic and aggrandizement, where you have this self-delusionment that some spiritual seekers use as a way of masking their perceived deficiencies and insecurities. Basically, they feel enlightened or they act enlightened or better than thou, but really they're like, it's like, I think a fun example that is kind of relevant is the people who are like, ooh, sage that they bought from like Walmart, but it's actually like inhumanely, like unethically harvested from indigenous peoples that are growing it, that don't get paid anything, and are basically like almost, if not they are, slaves, and like they're acting like they're so holier than thou and that they care about the people, but really they're just like glorifying themselves, or being like overly happy and optimistic and denying that there are real problems, denying that they have other issues. One of the like crutches that you can use in spirituality is psychonaut, like psychedelics in general, or horoscopes. So like getting someone else to lean on your like need for someone to tell you what's going on, and you will just kind of take what is there. Like you will only be spiritually like advanced, I guess, if you are using drugs. That's how you connect, and you lean on that, which is an ineffective method because you'll eventually become immune to the effects in regular doses, and you'll feel less and less, or you'll react differently, or you can endanger yourself by getting something because it's a substance that isn't highly regulated, and you will have to take your chances, which can be dangerous. With the horoscope bypass, you might lean on like conventional kind of pop culture astrology that you see every day in your email, or you'll constantly be doing readings for yourself and rely heavily on the tarot or runes, not for guidance and for psychological interpretation, but instead for like, this is concrete what's going to happen, and then cause yourself to be afraid for the future because you're not thinking clearly and not working with what you have, but instead creating this like monster, this boogeyman that you haven't seen. You also have spiritual guide bypass, prayer bypass, guru bypass. These are like basically the same concept. Either you have your angels that are your spiritual guides, or you base it all on, oh, there's a little bee. I want to show you the little bee. He's like right here. And you can see him. Do you see him? There he goes. Oh, he's really fast. I can't keep up with him. But he was really tiny. Sorry, I couldn't catch up with him fast enough. I wanted to share. Back to the video. Back to our scheduled programming. But these things, you're relying on prayer, so you believe it's in God's hands now. I no longer need to work on it. That's not true. Relying on your angels. Oh, well, my angels have my back, or my spirit guide has my back, and they won't lead me astray. This is not true. Or you, like, put so much faith in your mentor or guru or general teacher, whatever you want to call them, like, you put all your faith in their ability to lead you that you forget to think for yourself. These can be problems that lead you into religious censorship, which is when you ignore other things. Like, I've seen a lot of people doing this lately, and when they gatekeep, but it can lead you to be like, oh, well, my teacher only does it this way, I can only do it this way. I can't explore other methods, I can't look at this type of text. And you'll see it in religious groups. Like, when I was younger and Harry Potter had just come out, my church was like, you can't read Harry Potter, that's witchcraft, that'll lead you to the devil. And it's like, no, it's a book. But these are some issues that you can encounter in the spiritual community. Some of the big problems with bypassing is that you do avoid that growth and that focus on the psychology and your own problems and moving forward. What happens when you do that, or at least to combat that, you should practice mindfulness motivations and like general daily journal keeping. I like to keep a list of physically what is happening, bullet points of everything that's happened, like verbatim, and list of emotions and feelings that have happened side by side, but not combined, because I want to keep them separate so that I can tell what's happened and what do I feel has happened, so that I can go back and read just the physical of what's happened and then go back and read how it made me feel. Because that'll tell you about my emotional state for the day, as well as what I ate, where I went, how long I was there, things like that. But you have to be careful when you are just meditating on these problems and not working with them. A great example that I read in the commentary for the article was, imagine if a child is hurting and all you did was watch and you didn't actually help them. And that's the real problem that we have with the spiritual community, is if we notice there's an issue, but we just keep complaining about it instead of doing something about it. With the problem of religious censorship, where we limit our sources or we refuse to acknowledge certain sources because of reason A or because of philosophy B, and instead don't even read, because I feel even if you're against the philosophy, you should read it. I have drastically alternate viewpoints on my bookcase. I have the Satanist Bible and the regular, like, Christian Bible, and the Orthodox Bible, and the Apocrypha. I say regular, I mean Henry, whatever. I don't like that one. I don't like that one at all. But I have all of them on the same shelf next to books on Celtic witchcraft and druidry, and next to like Uncle Tom's Cabin, next to Mein Kampf. They're all on the same shelf. Well, actually they're not right now. They were at one point, all just on the same shelf, because I just haven't organized my books. But just, it doesn't matter what the book is. I want to read it because if someone's going to give you an informed decision, they should know what your view is and what their view is. So, like, I know what I feel, but I can understand what you're feeling if I read it, or I can understand where you went wrong. I can understand what people are upset about or what people are confused about if I read all the sides of the argument. But in communities like gatekeeping, which can lead to certain issues like I understand gatekeeping in a closed religion, like voodoo or certain Native American tribes, but I also feel that gatekeeping and keeping off like closed religions to prevent appropriation and the like lack of appreciation for their culture is valid, but it can also lead to the loss of culture. If you're like how people don't want you to read their Book of Shadows and they want to hide it and they don't want to share, like not sharing our ideas is how we lose religions. But you don't want to appropriate. You want to take what it is for what it is. They brought up in Occultism on the Side of Salt how a lot of the modern traditions come from Abrahamic practices, but we reject Christianity. And like I'll recognize when something comes from something else. If it's influenced by Catholicism, if it's influenced by more Protestant idea, if it's influenced by some like way out there thing, I want to know. I want to know the history and I want to know every part of. That's the problem I see in communities that close themselves off from other language, is that they miss out on the opportunity to learn the etymology, they miss out on the opportunity to learn the scientific as well as the spiritual studies for the people or the religious group that they're in. They also miss out on the opportunities to expand their horizons. But you have to be weary of that appropriation. Just taking, oh, I thought this was cute, let me like girlify it. And it's like, no, you're disrespecting the actual culture that it's from. You should love and respect it in the status that it is. You can take inspiration from it, but don't copy it. Like how people use smudging when they're not even doing smudging. They're just generally smoke cleanse saging, but they're not smudging and they're calling it smudging, which is an appropriation of the word. Like I know a correct form of smudging, but I don't use smoke cleansing at all. I also know kernips, which is the more Greek holy water kind of thing. You do with Palo Santo and other stuff. But I don't do that either because there's still smoke. And I'd prefer something that I'm not going to trip and throw all over the floor and make a big mess. That's why I use scent. But I feel avoiding appropriation and avoiding the opportunity to disrespect other religions kind of play hand in hand with gatekeeping. Which, although it annoys me, I also appreciate the way that you can protect your practices in this way. But if someone is genuinely interested in learning and not just like appropriating or spreading random like teachings, I feel like you should be able to look at it. I know not everyone agrees with that, but I'm a person who wants just everyone to be able to learn everything that they can and see everything that they can and not have to avoid seeing something, or someone who's just going to make up something and believe it versus hearing it from multiple sources that it's happening and taking just one source for its word compared to like hearing everyone say something different and looking at the truth. I feel like gatekeeping can lead to one other issue, which is the final topic of this very long video, which is imposter syndrome. Which imposter syndrome is kind of when you feel like you're a fake. You feel like you're missing something or you're not real, which I see it a lot when we gatekeep in the witchcraft community. Like, oh, you're not a witch if you do this, or like people say only like witches aren't allowed to look at heathenry and general Norse mythology like practices. And then I study everything. I love everything, especially the fact that heathenry comes from being on the heath and like on the mounds, speaking with your dead and communicating with them. And I find that to be a very beautiful practice. I find that to be a beautiful like origination for it. And I like to study all these different aspects. But the heathenry community that I met, they were like really like, we don't want anything from heathens. We only want things like anything that's not from a heathen. You know, it's about heathenry, but if it's not directly from a heathen, like it's not heathenry and I don't want it. And it's like, that's not really the case. Like I can comprehend something that's not mine I'm not like incapable. I also find that in gatekeeping, you have people who are like, well, Wicca isn't a valid religion, which I'm not Wiccan. I'm not a fan of Wicca, and not every Wiccan follows the Wiccan Rede, which is something I didn't really think about, but not every Wiccan does. The issue with Wicca is that because it's so new, only being like 60 or so years old, people don't see it as valid, but every religion has to start somewhere. And only by having participants who believe in the philosophies and ideas just generally present in the religion do we create new religions. So I don't think invalidating a religion is the right way to go. Or gatekeeping and saying you're not a witch if you practice X, Y, or Z. Because that's going to create imposters, and that's the problem we have with people who are like, they're baby witches, is they're babies and they've been reading and practicing for like a year, but they've never done spell work, and they've never talked about what like they believe in a broader context because they're afraid. They're afraid to come forward and talk about it, and they feel like they're not real witches. They're babies, they're minor. They feel like they're not validated, and someone's going to tell them they shouldn't do something in their practice and try. Like, we all make mistakes, and we all need to move forward with what we're doing. You shouldn't feel like an imposter just because you do something different, which is the problem when we come into communities, because we get faced with doubt and we get faced with alternative like practices, and they can make you feel like yours are less valid, and it can create that imposter syndrome, like, oh, I'm not a real witch, what am I doing, how do I fix it? And it's like, no, you're valid, you're just different than someone else, because everyone's practice should be their own. I will be doing a video in the future on how we can't really talk about our religions in public and in a group setting for fear of imposing on others and for fear of like attacking our own beliefs and creating imposter syndrome in ourselves with our like religion and with our views of God and goddess and etc. And I feel that talking about why we can't and trying to work through it so that we can bring it up more often so that people aren't afraid and we don't feel as targeted to be open about our beliefs, be open to being wrong. And I think that's an important thing to bring up. Alright, I hope you liked my really long video on toxic spirituality and some of the issues that come from it. I will see you next time here on Sister Check.